Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the next chapter in our 2021 Climate Action webinar series. My name is Ann Cotter, AIA Lead AP. As the AIA California's Vice President of Communications and Public Affairs, I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. As you know, AIA California has developed an in-depth series focused on understanding and implementing the AIA framework for design excellence. This series will run through the end of 2021 and features monthly hour-long general climate action webinars, as well as 90-minute webinars that dive deeper into technical topics. Additionally, AIA California has partnered with various organizations with like-minded goals to bring bonus content to you in the comfort of your office, wherever that may be. As always, all webinar content and additional resources will be available on the AIA California website shortly after each session. A few quick housekeeping reminders before we get started. Today's session qualifies for one AIA HSW learning unit for those watching live, and AIA California staff will report those units for you. The session is also being recorded and will be posted on the AIA California website with additional resources and a PDF of the presentation shortly after the presentation. As a reminder, please use the Q&A function to ask any questions for today's presenters. You can also like a question to move it to the top of the queue. We have a unique opportunity today with a presentation by two firm leaders from LPA, a California-based integrated design firm. They will provide insights into how the firm uses the AIA 2030 commitment as a transformative tool to influence design practice and reduce predicted carbon emissions. Their efforts are recognized at all three levels of the AIA and far beyond. In addition to their 266 AIA design awards, including numerous AIA COTE Top 10 awards, earlier this year, LPA was announced as 2021 AIA California Firm Award recipient. Also, we have a photo essay from LPA with some examples of a few of their lead platinum projects. Please find the link in the chat or visit the AIA California homepage. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our two presenters. Keith Hempel, FAIA, specializes in the design of buildings with sustainable focus. Throughout his 20-year career, he has contributed to numerous award-winning and LEED certified projects, championing strategic and sustainable design practices to improve the lives of end users and the project's response to the environment. Keith leads an integrated client-centered design process. As design director, he works with the developer and workplace clients to create sustainably focused designs that balance the practical and the poetic. He is known for his collaborative approach and thoughtful engagement with the team and client throughout the project's entirety. He particularly enjoys adaptive reuse and renovation work. To Keith, the reimagining of an outdated building is environmentally responsible, brings value to the building owner, and positively impacts the surrounding community. And joining Keith is Eric Ring, PE. As Director of Engineering, Eric provides overall leadership for the LPA's multidisciplinary engineering efforts, including structural, sites, and system design focused teams. The engineering teams at LPA works to enhance our approach of an informed design process using integrated teams. Eric provides technical and design leadership for integrating appropriate, cost-effective, and high-performance engineering solutions for LPA projects. His focus is on integrating sustainable design strategies within LPA's projects through understanding every project's goals, opportunities, and constraints. And with that, take it away, Keith and Eric.
Great, thank you, Ann.
Thank you.
Appreciate the introduction.
A dramatic pause while we figure
Yes, I
out Zoom.
apologize. Here we go.
All right.
Is everybody seeing that okay? Great. So, Ann, thank you for the introduction, and thank you to AIA California for the invitation. We're really excited to kind of be sharing our story with AIA California today, and we'll go ahead and get started. A little bit about LPA for those of you who aren't familiar with us. We're a about 420 person firm. We have 6 regional studios. We are headquartered in Irvine, California, but we also have studios in San Diego, San Jose, Sacramento, San Antonio, and Dallas, Texas. So, you know, as we said, we're an integrated firm. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but we really enjoy collaborating and working with all our disciplines under one roof. We're also a diverse firm. We have 8 practice areas: K-12 education, higher education, civic, commercial, workplace, mixed use, healthcare, and sport and rec. So a lot of different and varied projects across our portfolio, which provides a lot of fun, a lot of variety. The reason we're here today is because, as mentioned, some of our recent success. We are the largest firm in the country to achieve the 2030 targets, both in 2018, 2019, achieving 70% energy reduction across our portfolios, which both years totaled just slightly over 5 million square feet. And because of that success, part of the reason for that success led to us being selected Firm of the Year by AIA California. So honors that we're tremendously proud of, and always want to thank our clients and our design partners who we work with, because we can't do it without them. But you know, the success achieved with the 2030 commitment in 2018 and 2019 just wasn't something we happened into. We've actually been looking at performance and tying performance to design excellence for quite some time. Back in 2004, we actually set our first firm-wide goals on performance and trying to exceed California's Title 24 energy code by 25% across all of our projects. So when we started reporting data for the 2030 commitment, 2011, 2012, we already had some of that methodology and some of that rigor in place, which has helped us kind of leverage that to the success with the 2030 commitment.
Hey, Keith, I think we're getting some kind of gray bars on the screen. I don't know if you're seeing that, but not to throw you off here too much, but
okay. I'm not seeing that. Anne, are you having the same problem?
I think it's your Zoom menu bar in your window, or in your video window. If you have a second screen, you can move it over to the second screen and we should be good.
I'm actually on a laptop.
Can you minimize it? It is showing it. Yeah, that helps. If you can minimize or close those.
How's that look? That's about all I can do from right here on my laptop.
Hey, that's better. Let's roll with it.
Okay, awesome.
All right.
Thank you. Okay, so we are an integrated design firm. We do have all the disciplines we need for a project under one roof. We started and were founded as an architectural firm that did a lot of developer and core and shell work in 1965. Shortly thereafter, we continued our evolution as a firm with interiors, added interiors. In 1995, we then added landscape because we understood that important connection from the inside to the out and felt adding landscape made us a better design firm. Continued that thought process in 2007, 2010. We started to begin to add the engineering disciplines, structural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and civil were all added between 2007 and 2010. And then the kind of the final piece to the puzzle, something that really helped us kind of close the loop on being an informed integrated design firm was the addition of our research team, which we call LPA Red in 2015. So they really help us bring analysis and information to our clients to help them make better decisions. So what we thought we would do today, we're going to talk a little bit about our approach as a firm to our projects, and we kind of have 5 key points that we'll touch on. But then Eric's going to follow alongside of me and actually share how we take that approach and bring it to projects. And he has a couple case studies for us to look at that takes some of these thoughts and shows the application. So the first point we wanted to start with was the effort we go through to empower our project teams. When we first started on this road of becoming an integrated sustainable design firm, we realized to achieve sustainability at scale, we really needed to empower all of our project teams to bring those thoughts and concepts to our clients, as opposed to having it kind of that expertise reside within a couple of key individuals in the firm. We've really worked hard to spread that broadly across the organization. And the reason we did that was because we feel our project teams, they're most closely connected to our clients, and they're in the best position to align project goals with our clients' values. But with this means that each of our project teams need to have that rigor that we've talked about. They have to be able to set targets, they have to be able to track progress, and they have to be able to share results with every project that they work on. And to build this fluency, if you would, across the entire organization meant that we have to invest in our people. We have to, at the base, at kind of a base level, provide the tools and the software that they need to be successful to analyze and document their projects. But that also means increased training and education. So, going through that process, and it's been something we've been working on for the last 12 years at least, is that the training, the way we think about training has to be a little bit different. I think we've all been to a training session where we learned really good information, but then we went back to our desk and weren't able to apply it for a week or even a month until after we've had the session. And thinking about, oh, I learned about that, but I don't remember it. So what we've tried to do is break those training sessions down into smaller groups and to actually apply them in a more timely fashion so that participants can actually leave the session, go back to their desk, and begin applying it to their project immediately to maximize its effectiveness. The other thing we've learned through our education is that we have an institutional memory. And I think it's important for every firm to kind of understand what their institutional memory is. And what I mean by that is at LPA, if we want a key idea or a key concept to stick, we have an institutional memory of about 90 days. So if we introduce that topic, that idea at a training session, we need to repeat it about 3 months later. So great example, converting from trying to exceed Title 24, moving to the 2030 commitment and starting to talk about predicted energy use intensity. That switch of metrics meant that, about every 3 months, we were trying to reintroduce that metric to everyone to keep it fresh in memory and to keep it front of mind until it could be applied without thought to a project, to an opportunity. The next idea that we have for you is supporting an informed design process. And we feel really fortunate here at LPA. We are an integrated design team. We do have all the disciplines under one roof, and we do love to work in that fashion as an integrated team. But it's not to say that all of our projects work that way. A lot of our work is actually done with a combination of in-house disciplines and out-of-house consultants. And regardless of the team structure, we work really hard to foster that sense of being an integrated team with regardless of who's at the table. So, bringing everyone together early, co-authoring goals, working with our clients to define success and spread that definition across all of our team members, and really work hard to foster an atmosphere of mutual respect. So the idea that a good idea can come from anywhere. It doesn't necessarily have to be directly related to your discipline. And that the idea that every perspective brings value to the collaborative team are keys to what we found to be successful. So, going through this process, we talked about rigor, setting targets, tracking progress, sharing results. It does give you the opportunity, if you're transparent with those results, to create a feedback loop. The idea that what you learn from one project, sharing the results broadly across our firm and allowing other firms to carry that to their next project creates this culture of continuous improvement that helps us kind of meet the ever increasing targets set forward by the 2030 commitment. And this means sometimes that we're sharing results that may have missed the mark, but those lessons learned can help other teams avoid pitfalls that they might encounter in their projects. And it also means celebrating success. We have projects that are very successful, and learning what they did right is as equally important as valued as learning as what we might have done wrong. So especially in today's world, we're all working remotely. I think it's really easy to forget to celebrate a job well done. It's really easy to fall into the next deadline, but it's really important to take that time, take that pause, and reinforce the good habits that were established with any project or any project team. And then one idea to close on, and it kind of overarches everything. It's a great one to end on, is the idea of connecting performance to design excellence. We're very lucky here at LPA. Our president, Dan Heinfeld, really set us on this course of being an informed, sustainably oriented design firm years ago. But at our firm, we've also tried to encourage bottom-up accountability. The idea that anyone on a project team could call timeout and say, hey, if we don't do a course correction here, we might miss our targets, or there might be a better way to go about achieving this goal. So the combination of top down and bottom up really creates a balance within our firm, which we really try to promote. And then again, the idea about sustainability across an entire organization at scale, there really has to be this attitude of no project left behind. So that means that the idea of sustainability, the ideas of performance really need to be part of the definition of what you consider a successful project. So the image on the screen right here, very proud of it. It's our ENC Preschool and Nature Center. It was our first project to win a COTE Top 10 award. It's a great segue into one of our case studies, which Eric will be walking through now.
Yeah, thank you, Keith. And we'll stay on this image for, well, that's all right. We're cool. It's the Nature Preschool is a tremendous facility. In addition to winning the AIA COTE Top 10 award, it's a LEED Platinum facility. It's net zero energy. It's a client we'd worked with in the past and designed another net zero energy facility for them 10 years ago. So really a tremendous client. And Keith talked about setting targets. A project like this is a real gift because the target's really straightforward from a performance standpoint. This is a committed client who wanted to achieve zero energy. And while that's not easy, it's very clear where we needed to go. So if we go to the next image, it's an image I actually really like a lot more about this project because it speaks to what this project's really about, which is frankly not the actual building, but is the site and is this incredible nature playground that our landscape architecture team worked with the client and designed and developed. And it's this sort of fabulous space where most of the preschool students at this school spend most of their time outdoors, and that's the whole ethos of the school. But what this image also shows is one of the subtle challenges we had with this project, which are those relatively tall, mature eucalyptus and pine trees there along that fence line, which are in the backyards of neighboring residential properties. Those are trees that were probably planted 40 or 50 years ago. They're not on our site, but they do, as you can see in the image, cast pretty long shadows in the afternoon. So for a project that's trying to achieve net zero energy through renewable energy and photovoltaics, that's a real design constraint. If you go to the next image, Keith, we're all designers, right? And we all start somewhere and end up somewhere else on every project. This is a real early initial concept, which is probably typical of lots of projects in our firm and throughout our industry, kind of an interesting, building form and indication of where a photovoltaic system might sit on the site. But not taking any site context really into play in this very initial scheme. Those tall eucalyptus trees along the south, which is the left side of this image, aren't even reflected in this design. But again, this is something as a firm, we practice informed design. We want to study the conditions of the site, the constraints, and really optimize our designs for all of the goals we're trying to achieve, which for this project included net zero energy. So if you go to the next slide, you can see as that concept developed and matured, it came form of what ultimately was the design, where the building was sited very carefully in the sort of north west corner or northeast corner of the site, basically the sunniest portion of the site. And you can again see the idea of the architecture with the butterfly roof being formed in a way that could support the renewable energy system, the photovoltaics, and an optimal orientation to the south, tilted. But again, even in this rendering, the shadows are sort of all off, right? They're headed somehow. The sun is in the north part of the sky, and the landscaping is not really reflective of true conditions. If you advance to the next image, though, you see it's a fairly good representation of what the final project was. And again, you see the long shadows in this image. I'm not exactly sure when this image was shot, but all those mature trees really informed where the building should be located on the site. You'll also see that our initial concept of the photovoltaic system size array really actually compressed and shrunk as we developed the project. In the background in the upper right is the Environmental Nature Center building that I alluded to that we built 10 years ago. One lesson we learned from that project was the PV system on that building is actually a little bit oversized for the actual energy use of the facility. And this is a relatively lean budget. It's a project that's funded by by donations and fundraising. So, not overspending on things we didn't really need was obviously important to this and every other client. So really optimizing the PV and optimizing the location of the building, was one really important aspect of this project that we were able to successfully achieve, and we're proud of how that turned out. But this is a pretty atypical project. This is a client asking for net zero. It's relatively small. The next project I want to talk to is actually a lot more indicative of sort of a typical LPA project, in that this is a large ground up K through 12 campus. About 40% of our work is in public school projects, mostly here in California as well as in Texas. This project is a little atypical in its scale because it involved designing a elementary, middle, and high school, all for the same district, on one large piece of land that the district acquired, which had formerly been a state a medical facility. That facility had been abandoned for many years. The buildings and the infrastructure were in total disrepair and not really salvageable at all. So it's a very large site with a lot of program in it, but in some ways a fresh site with very few constraints, because essentially everything on the site had to be removed in order to build this project. The rendering on the screen is of the final the sort of final rendering of our final solution. But if you advance to the next slide, every project starts well before you can do those final renderings. And here you can see one of the things that we were able to do with this project was have a team that was focused on and thinking about, well, what is the energy performance of this facility going to be? And one of the early design decisions that they wanted to explore was about orientation. You could see this as an early concept with this sort of oddly shaped site, and the three buildings represent an early concept of an elementary, middle, and high school that would all be these kind of courtyard schools, along with this sort of rectangular multi-purpose building. And what the design to explore was, we know that sort of a true north-south orientation is optimal. That's option one. But there were some reasons why something off, about 30 degrees off of north-south, might make sense. So the team did a preliminary analysis in a very rough early energy modeling, and up with this result that said the sort of optimal orientation would have a predicted EUI of 173, and the maybe preferred orientation would have a predicted EUI of 176. So that's about a 2% difference. Doesn't seem like that big a deal. Maybe we shouldn't worry too much about optimal orientation. But of course, those EUI numbers are completely ridiculous. Schools should not be operating at an EUI of 173. That's a number more associated with a healthcare facility or a laboratory facility, a much more energy facility. So we were able to then kind of gather around and go, guys, these results don't make any sense. Let's talk about how we came up with this. It turns out, again, this was early in conceptual design, that the architect working on this analysis had reached out to our in-house electrical engineering team and said, what should the power requirements for this campus be? To which our electrical engineer said, well, we would size the service, for the whole campus somewhere around 10 to 15 watts per square foot. And so that's the number that got input into the energy model. Let's be conservative. We'll call it 15 watts a square foot. That's a completely wrong assumption for an energy for the plug loads in a facility that's probably going to be more like 0.5 to 1 watt per square foot. So it was refined. We redid the analysis and got much more reasonable results. An EUI in the optimal orientation of 20, a predicted EUI of 21 with the other orientation. So a slight difference, but that's 5%, and translated out to maybe $25,000 a year in utility costs just by that one design move was kind of the estimate. So that opened our designers to say, well, maybe this orientation thing does really matter, but really I'm telling this as as an example of the lessons we've learned through the years as a firm about the fluency of doing energy analysis, understanding what the inputs are, understanding what reasonable outputs are, because all of that is really critical to having a successful design process. And it's something we learn designer to designer, project to project. If you advance the slide, Keith, of course, real site design isn't just sort of, rectangles in a big white open field. Anyone who's worked in schools, and especially high schools, once we figure out the athletics and the parking and the fire access and the outdoor spaces, there's a lot that goes into site planning school facilities. And the final site design, was really nothing like, as is typical, some of those early concepts. But you can see that the overall north-south orientation was something we were able to try to maintain and hold on to. And some of that early design analysis really informed hanging on to that as an important strategy. If we advance to the next slide, the next thing that was really critical to this project and is part of our process was trying to do some research. Again, we had these kind of early energy analysis. We had some sense of where the numbers were landing, but we also wanted to understand, well, what is an appropriate EUI value for a school, both looking at the baseline conditions that 2030 uses from the 2003, how that changed in the 2012 CBEX, and also looking at where we can get data from our built projects. Where are the actual work that we're working on? Where are the energy numbers landing there? That's not always easy, quite frankly. It's hard sometimes to get good energy data that makes sense and that is reasonable from our projects, but it's something we strive for because we feel like it helps us learn what's working and what's not, what's showing up as good performance in our built work, and then allows us to inform our ongoing projects. You can see in this graphic, which was early analysis, the baseline for 2030 was an EUI of 75 for K-12 schools. And at the time, we were targeting a 70% reduction. So that set a target then value of trying to get to an EUI, a design predicted EUI of 23. So if you could go to the next slide, Keith. Then as the design progressed, like any project, we had some things that we tried and we were successful at, and other things that didn't quite make it into the project. Our client was very interested, and we really explored the idea, and this was 4 or 5 years ago now, of how we could do an all-electric campus. Could we eliminate fossil fuels? It turned out that remains challenging for large projects, but it was certainly challenging a few years ago. And in the context of a K-12 campus, we have an aquatics facility and a swimming pool with pool heaters. We have multiple kitchen facilities and food service. Eliminating natural gas service to the site altogether turned out to just not be feasible. So it was something we explored and we tried for, but we were able to eliminate much of the natural gas for space heating and water heating. Not all of it. We still have some package units with some gas furnaces in them, and we have some of the larger water heaters which remain gas, but a lot of the water heaters we were able to go with electric, and we were able to eliminate boiler loops and reheat loops and use electric reheat, which isn't necessarily, that can be kind of a controversial engineering choice, but it was also a big cost reduction to the project because we eliminated boiler systems and lots of copper piping and with less expensive all-electric reheat systems. But again, large project, big budget, big site, lots of complexity. When we got to the end of the design development phase, as happens, and we've all experienced this, we were over budget and the cost estimates were coming in high. And for the project to move forward into construction documents, we had to find some cost reductions, some value engineering, as our industry likes to refer to it. At that stage, at the end of DD, wholesale redesign, programmatic cuts, those are tough things to do, right? We've already gone very far into the design process. So the value engineering, as we've all experienced, tends to be the kind of marginal things that are easy to take off the project without having a big impact on redesign. So one of the things that our team wound up doing is looking at the rigid insulation that we had specified for the perimeter walls. And we really evaluated, there was a several $100,000 potential value engineering for taking the rigid insulation off, but would we still meet code? How would that affect our energy performance? That was something we studied. And with 8-inch stud walls, which we needed for seismic and structural reasons anyways, with the bad insulation, we were still meeting California Title 24 mandatory minimum insulation levels. if we removed the rigid. So ultimately, we wound up doing that as part of a value engineering package to stay on track and keep the project moving forward. It impacted our energy results by a couple percentage points, I think 1 or 2%. Interestingly, in preparing for this presentation, I talked to our project manager, architectural project manager, who led the overall effort, and he really, kind of looking back, issued some real regret over that. Like, I wish we'd worked harder to find different value engineering or not got ourselves into that situation, because taking that rigid insulation off, even though it was only kind of 1 or 2%, for the life of the facility, I regret that probably wasn't the greatest choice. But I think, again, real projects have real challenges, and we wind up making tough decisions. Another thing we explored with this client was, what were the opportunities to integrate photovoltaics on the campus? And early on, we were really studying how to do sort of large PV parking canopies, which a lot of our K-12 school clients prefer. But the image on the screen is not of this project. It's actually of a different project where we were able to integrate PV canopies. Again, for this project, where we were at budget-wise, we designed for the infrastructure, but we were not able to include the PVs in the project. Now, for schools, oftentimes they're able to finance photovoltaic systems through power purchase agreements, separate from their bond-funded construction funds. That's not true for lots of other things in a school. They need to pay for those things out of bond funding. So we find this in public work fairly typical, where photovoltaics are planned for, but then installed later on through different financing mechanisms. And in fact, now the project's about 2/3 constructed, and that's exactly what the district is doing. They're going out for proposals, and they'll probably wind up with about 700 kilowatts of photovoltaics across the entire campus, which is pretty great. And interestingly, or ironically, the PPA providers they're reaching out to don't want to put them in the parking. They want to put them on the roofs of the building. Now, fortunately, we've designed the buildings in such a way that the roofs can accommodate that the electrical infrastructure is set up to provide for connection of renewable energy systems. So the district is well positioned to accommodate this PPA. But it's, again, one of those things where we were really studying that and evaluating it early in conceptual and schematic design, had to take it off the table in design development and CDs. And now towards the end of construction, those photovoltaic systems are coming back in as part of an addition to the campus. So if you can go to the next slide, again, these are sort of, I guess, examples and stories and vignettes from a real project of the types of things we run into and the types of lessons we're able to kind of learn along the way, and the things that help us ultimately become a better firm, designer to designer, project to project. It certainly doesn't happen all at once. But this project overall for our firm has been a very successful project. Again, it's a large scale. The client is happy. We ultimately delivered it on budget. It's now reaching, it's almost done in construction. It's also won several design awards. It was a profitable project for our firm. By any measure, it's a successful project. But as you've seen throughout this presentation, one of the things we do is sort of capture this graphic showing the AIA 2030 commitment metrics of the predicted EUI against the baseline, and we tend to publish those for all of our projects. For this particular project, we wound up, after the design was complete, with a predicted EUI of 28.2, which is really solid for a school, against the baseline of 75. That's a 62% reduction. But that's not the 70% reduction we were targeting. And what was interesting to me, or what was enlightening about the culture of our firm, is we had a leadership discussion about this project, which was largely very positive, because again, it was a very successful project. But as part of that discussion, our CEO asked the design team about this specific thing. Hey, we were targeting 70%, we only got to 62%. What could we have done differently? What could we have done better? And I think our designers who worked on the project were a little taken by surprise in that conversation, because in their minds, they designed an incredibly successful project, and that was true. And there was some discussion about the insulation value engineering and the fact that ultimately the photovoltaics didn't come in. But what was maybe most interesting to me was that same group of designers, when we started another project, a couple weeks after that leadership discussion, boy, were they focused on, when are we going to start our energy model and what's our opportunity for photovoltaics? Frankly, without saying it, basically saying, I don't want to sit in another meeting a couple years from now when this project is complete and have to answer, hard questions about how we couldn't have done better. And that culture of learning and accountability, I think, has really helped our firm continue to push forward and make good energy performance a priority on every project. And that comes from both the leadership of our firm, and frankly, it also comes from a lot of our young designers coming out of school who are really invested and committed to trying to do the best they can to design really high performing projects, given all the challenges and constraints that we all deal with on real projects every day. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Keith, and we're going to talk a little bit about our current ongoing efforts towards documenting a lot of what we've just been talking about into our firm-wide sustainability action plan.
Yes, thank you, Eric. As Eric said, this is one of our goals for 2021 is actually taking another look at updating our sustainability action plan. Working as a team, Eric and I are both involved. It's opened up the doors to so many great discussions. We're really looking forward to concluding this later this year and making it available to everyone. But kind of thinking about how and what we're going to talk about, we tried to create a tool that's going to not only make us a better firm, but simple and concise, and really is something that we can use across all our studios and leverage it in a way that creates and kind of strengthens the continuity of all our project teams. So, in thinking about what we're going to be talking about, we came up with a really simple outline. We're going to start off just kind of stating who we are, what our missions and what our mission and what our values are, and then we're going to start with kind of an overview of our approach, which we've talked about today, and a lot of what we've shared will be in there. But talking about how we design, right? The third section, how we share. How do we share internally with our teams, with our staff members? How do we share with our clients? How do we align ourselves with our clients' values to help them do really great informed projects? And then how do we actually share that and raise the level of knowledge within the communities in which we work and practice? So the final step of our sustainability action plan is going to be focused on how we practice and really talking about how we live and work in each of our studios, and how are we optimizing our operations, how we live and work so that we can be as efficient and optimized architectural practice, an integrated design firm practice. So, and then conclusion, talking about what we see for the future and where we'd like to evolve to as a firm. So to help us and to help the entire profession, I did want to point out that the AIA has just published a document recently, a guidance document titled Creating a Sustainability Action Plan That Works. I'd encourage everyone who has an interest, no matter where you are in your journey as a practice with regards to sustainability, whether you're practiced and well-versed or just starting your journey, I'd encourage you to follow the link. A lot of great firms have contributed to the document and shared some of the things that they've done that they've found successful, and there's a lot of great information to kind of help you improve and help reinforce that culture of continuous improvement that we talked about. So in summary, just some key points we wanted to conclude with. Thinking about your firm and your practice, really focus on fostering that culture that links up performance and sustainability design excellence. Be open to an integrated approach and leverage all the strengths that your team bring to the table. Look to build that fluency across your entire organization. And for those of you who are excited but not quite sure where to begin, it only takes one project. Starting that first project and learning from it, taking those lessons learned and feeding the next project, that's all it takes to get started. So with that, we'll stop sharing and we'll hand the mic back to Anne. And we would love the opportunity to answer any questions that the audience may have.
Great. Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Eric. So first question up is, what energy modeling tool did you use for the early energy analysis?
So the example I showed,
That was a popular question.
Yeah, I think there's I can see on a few questions about energy modeling, which is a challenging topic, for our firm. The example I showed was an early energy model using Sapphira. We have used, one thing we've learned, and certainly we recognize, is that there are a lot of different energy modeling tools. None of them are perfect. In fact, a lot of them are pretty frustrating to use if you're not an expert. And they have sort of different strengths and weaknesses, and they're a tool like any other design tool. So sort of, the right tool at the right time is part of anybody's craft, right? And don't use the same tool for every question or every problem you're trying to answer. So for early phase energy modeling, we've used Sapphira. We've also, we're starting to increasingly use Climate Studio, which plugs in nicely with Rhino. Again, they're both, anybody who's done this, they have limitations and quirks, and they take some getting used to. We strive to have the folks as close to the design team as possible, or to the design decisions as possible, running those analyses, rather than having the analysis be, kind of completely out of house, out of mind by a consultant. We're trying to educate designers to use the tools, and we're fortunate to have engineering staff in mechanical and electrical, as well as some energy analysis specialists who can provide then support to design teams that are trying to use those tools. And frankly, sometimes that analysis just gets done by an in-house specialist. Occasionally, we do go out of house. It does really depend on the project, the stage of the project, and the specific energy model or analysis questions that we're trying to answer. And I think, like a lot of firms, we're still experimenting and kicking the tires with different software and different processes. We have not yet sort of perfectly figured out this is the way to do it, and it always works. So
yeah, what I'd add to that, Eric, too, I think, early on, we were looking for one tool to kind of rule them all. Part of the token reference there, but it doesn't exist. I mean, each of the tools, all the tools that Eric mentioned, have their strengths and weaknesses, and so we've never really standardized and say this is going to be our tool that we use. We really let the teams apply the tool they think is going to get them the best result, because that's really what we're after, is the best answer. So if a team feels more comfortable in Sapphira, that's great. If a team would rather kind of leverage Rhino and Climate Studio, or some of the plugins to Rhino, that's great too. It's really about getting the right information to our clients so they can make good decisions.
Great, thank you, Eric and Keith. So next question, could you speak further on how interdisciplinary office shares knowledge between disciplines to help you achieve all that you have?
Yeah, I mean, we're 6 locations, so we're kind of a medium-sized firm, right? We're certainly a lot bigger than a lot of firms, but nowhere near the size of some of the big, international firms that have thousands of people in dozens or hundreds of locations. But we struggle with knowledge sharing. It's something we spend a lot of time on. We use both an internal, intranet website to try to share information, and a lot of kind of meetings and trainings that, especially over the last year, have been meetings like this that are virtual. But we still find that all the time, there's pockets of knowledge in our firm who've really worked out, good solutions to a design challenge, and another team and another part of our firm is struggling with the exact same thing, and completely unaware that, another team has already done an amazing analysis or developed a great detail. So it's something we are aware of, and we just really work hard to find avenues to share good design information. I think, as Keith alluded to, we've definitely learned that saying something once to a team of 4 people who are all very busy and all have a lot going on tends not to stick. The messages, if we want them to stick, we find we have to repeat them, and keep saying them, keep reminding folks at every opportunity we get, and then over time, those things start to sink in once people have heard it the 3rd, 4th, or 20th time, right?
I would say the other tool we use quite frequently is to kind of share knowledge is just throwing our work up on a wall and having a charrette and inviting people who may not be directly associated with the project to kind of be kind of this outside perspective. So you know, a lot of times Eric may not be directly involved with a project that we might be working on, but we love to have him join us and kind of just sit in and share his expertise to kind of, you know, have that kind of cross-discipline knowledge. So, you know, pinups are great, right? To go with the trainings and to go with the internet. I think that all those different scales are crucial, and one probably isn't successful on its own.
Great, thank you. I think you may have addressed this next question already. Did you ever work with an energy modeling consultant, IES, VE, or in-house with Safaria?
Yeah, we try to keep it in-house. Okay, sometimes we do, you know, it just really depends on the complexity and the question we're trying to answer. I mean, I'm not trying to promote or denigrate any software, but you know, we've found IES is a very powerful piece of software. We found it kind of hard to use. I know that there are firms that have sort of specialists who become really good at IES and use it really effectively. For us, that hasn't been the case. So we tried it for a while and have sort of focused on other things lately.
Great, thank you. Next up, what is the schedule for energy modeling efforts on your typical projects? Which phases, stages of design, who conducts the modeling at each stage, architects, engineers, etc.?
Yeah.
I could take this one. Ideally, ideally, and you know, I think you know, we're all used to practice, right? Varied project types, varied project schedules. Ideally, you know, and Eric showed some of those initial studies that for the high school, we're starting those models very early in our process. But you know, are we perfect? Are we 100% of the time doing those models early on? No, that's not the case. We have some projects that have to just fly to get to a certain milestone or a certain deadline to get, you know, funding or to get, you know, critical approvals from stakeholders. And sometimes those kinds of studies slip through the cracks. And so we sometimes are finding ourselves doing catch up. But ideally, we're setting those targets and those goals in our kickoff meeting, and the entire team is tied into them. Then in concept, early schematic, we're starting early modeling and finding out how we're starting to align with those targets. And then through later schematic design into design development, we're testing options and trying different ways to hit those targets so that when we start into construction documents, we're really getting detailed with our documentation for the project. We have a good understanding that we're on track to do what we're trying to do.
Great, thank you. Next question. What advice do you have to help others foster and cultivate a culture of sustainable-minded design? How have you all motivated an office of 400 plus to unite around this methodology?
Yeah, I think Eric's example for the high school at the end is perfect, right? There has to be an understanding at the end of a project when you're talking about, you know, those lessons learned and what you're going to be learning, that the level of sustainability that you achieved in your project is going to be part of the criteria by which you define success. Without that, it's really easy to let it just slide by until you have a project or a client that's really asking for it. So internally, you have to hold, you know, yourselves, each other accountable to the fact that every project is going to have a sustainable narrative.
Great, thank you. And are you using a decarbonization tool in concert with your energy models?
Yeah, we're starting to. You know, I think like a lot of firms, we're trying to look at embodied carbon. It's not easy. I mean, there's a lot of complexity to that. We've used Tally and something else I'm blanking right now. You know, again, part of what makes our firm unique and great is that we are an integrated team. So we have our whole structural engineering team who are really interested in, you know, how can we put less steel in our buildings and what are our options for you know, lower carbon concrete, and where can we start applying, you know, mass timber and wood structures in the name of carbon reduction, embodied carbon reduction. The analytical side of that, you know, like I think a lot of firms, we're figuring out, you know, how do you evaluate those kind of options. We've done a little bit of that, but we definitely have a lot to learn and a long way to go.
Yeah. Yeah, Tally is a really powerful tool. I think, you know, the other aspect of this that's really interesting is, you know, relaying those savings in carbon emissions, to our clients. We have a lot of sophisticated clients who are very interested and eager to understand that. We have other clients who are more interested in operation and maintenance and budgets that they have to stick to. And so, finding the right way to share those goals with our clients is something we're constantly working on and refining.
Great to know. Based on what you've been learning from your thorough energy modeling processes, are you finding that there are some building types and building sizes, configurations that make more sense for effectively responding to meeting the energy use requirements?
I love this question.
I mean, well, fundamentally, every project's different, no doubt. I think we are finding, we've put a lot of energy, to use no pun intended, into the AIA 2030 commitment targets, which just in 2020, shifted down from a target 70% reduction to a target 80% reduction. And I think we're finding, generically, that a lot of our projects can get into the 60, 70% reduction range with really good design. Once you start going well beyond that to 80, 90, 100% reduction, it requires, on-site renewable energy system, like the ENC preschool project we showed, and like the high school that's going to add PV. And so that, we're starting to talk more and more about, frankly, whether it's part of the day one, operating, budget, construction budget for the project, or whether it's a future installation. How do we optimize our projects so they can support, fairly significant photovoltaic systems? Are those in parking canopies? Are those on the roof? And that has real design ramifications about like massing. If it's a 6-story building, it's hard to put a lot of PV on the roof relative to the area of the building. It's easier to do with a low-rise, 1 or 2-story building. And so some of those discussions are starting to really direct and inform decisions about building massing and site design, in order to recognize that a lot of our projects, to meet these energy targets, are going to need to accommodate pretty significant photovoltaic systems.
Yeah, being with my focus in commercial practice, I can't tell you how many site plans we've drawn where we've started to draw a footprint of a building, and it's 80, 90, maybe 100 feet wide, nice and skinny, lots of opportunity for daylight. And as the project develops, much like the site plans Eric showed, right, that building keeps getting fatter, right? It keeps getting wider, and it usually office, lab, it usually ends up right around 120, 125 because of our clients' desire for efficiency and lab benching, or bay depth layouts for open office environments. And so trying to create that balance between what's optimal for the sustainable and energy goals and what our clients' values and needs are for their success is one of the great kind of balancing acts we do as professionals. So everything along with Eric, I'm working every time trying to get a skinnier building, but it's hard.
Great, thank you. Next question, have you done any post-construction evaluation to validate or verify energy prediction versus actual energy use? What lessons have you seen?
Yeah, we've done a fair amount of that, not as much as we'd like. We find it surprisingly challenging when we call our clients and say, hey, can we look at the energy bills? We work with a lot of institutional clients, and they kind of say, we don't even know where the energy bills go. They go to some other department that the accounting pays for those. Sometimes we're learning hard lessons about, sometimes the metering issues get really weird. Even though we're designing it, the metering still doesn't always make sense on college campuses and whatnot. We've certainly designed and specified meters and then come back to our clients, and the metering was never really set up right, which is frustrating because we really like to look at this data, and the data doesn't even exist. But where we have been able to get data, it is informative. It's informative partly because, as I think most people probably who've ever looked at this know, those great predictive models that I showed from almost always underestimate the project. Most real projects, for any number of reasons, use a bit more than they were predicted to, sometimes a lot more, which I want to ask the question, well, what happened here? But the energy simulation, of course, is sort of perfect simulation that everything's operating optimally. And in the real world, that's not the case. You know, things get left on, right? That in real, we're always trying to understand and tease out is if a facility has relatively high energy use, is that an indication that there's something that's not well designed or that's not operating efficiently? Or is that an indication that's just a highly used facility? You know, it's fully occupied, it's running, you know, again, if we're doing schools, if they're running lots of night and evening programs and they're running full summer school, have higher energy than a different school that's not used as intensely. And that's not necessarily, that may be an indication that we designed a really amazing school that the community just wants to use all through the evening and all weekend long. So one of the challenges looking at real energy data is trying to pull all that apart and say how much of this is a design or an operations thing and how much of this is just a city of use thing. And so it's just not as straightforward as cool. We have the energy data. Now we know what's going on. We dig a little deeper than that.
Yeah, and I would add we do have some great relationships with clients we've worked with, you know, for many years, and we have developed kind of a free flow of information backwards and forwards, and there's actually benefits to both sides, right? We get utility data back, and kind of helps us inform our design and what maybe we could tweak or optimize on our next project. But they also get information back on maybe they're not using the building right, or maybe some of the equipment that they have, or they're not using it in an efficient fashion. So it's a great dialogue to have with those clients who are open to it, because it does benefit both parties.
Thank you. Okay, one more question. We're kind of getting close to 1 o'clock. When you demolish existing buildings, are the materials recycled by way of a specification that requires it? What spec from CSI is used for that?
You know, a lot of our work is in California, and there's actually a pretty healthy construction waste recycling industry throughout the state. So I think most significant demo waste does get, you know, at least a pass through a fairly significant recycling. If we're doing a lead project, which is probably about half of our work, you know, that's always the case. But a lot of municipalities also have, you know, pretty strict requirements for construction sites about construction waste recycling. So I'm not sure how much that's true in other parts of the country, but I think we find in California, there's actually a pretty mature industry for that.
Okay, thank you. One more question. Have you worked in a jurisdiction that has passed regulations prohibiting natural gas connections? And what has your client's reaction been?
Yeah, that's a great question. Especially in Northern California, you know, we are seeing reach codes that are either you know, classified as natural gas bans or as you know, promoting electrification. And you know, I think in California, there is kind of this culture. Title 24 ramps up, you know, every code cycle, and so we find a lot of our clients are used to having to adapt how they do their buildings because of increasing codes. So it's not that they really appreciate some of the additional costs that can come with that, but there is an understanding that there is an environmental benefit, and that code, it's what code requires.
There is, though, there's a real scale challenge with all electric. At the residential scale and sort of small commercial, there's plenty of equipment options where you can do water heating and space heating and cooking with all electric appliances. When you start to get up to kind of a larger, you know, commercial scale, the heating, and if you've got really significant domestic hot water loads, if it's a, you know, a hospitality project or a food service facility, you know, we still don't really have, you know, basically water heaters and space heaters that are practical and reasonable at a large scale that we can do all electric. It's something that the engineering community and you know, we're involved with the Center for the Built Environment at Berkeley. They're looking at some of these issues too of, you know, I think a lot of folks are on board with electric. Absolutely makes sense environmentally, but practically, how do we do it? You know, with especially with the larger equipment.
Okay. There's two last questions here that are regarding budget. How do you manage budget to perform building performance analysis in all your projects? particularly high quality ones that they go over. And then also kind of combining last two questions. How do you manage the budget?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say a good thing, or it is what it is. A lot of our projects, again, are like publicly funded, school projects, where the budgets are very fixed, by the bond measures. We don't really have the ability in those projects to go back to our client and say, hey, we designed you this amazing project, but it's 10% over budget. Can you augment the budget? The voters have passed a bond. The money is what it is. So that's been good for our firm to develop, a design discipline of whatever our goals are, whatever our clients' goals are, we need to design within budget and not think that we can design one building if they want an average building, but we can ask them for a bigger budget if they want a really spectacular building. That's just not the reality of how most of our clients are able to operate. So it's something we really always strive to understand what our client's budget is, and then design within that budget and meet and strive to meet all the objectives and goals they have and we have for the project.
Great. Well, thank you. Being it's 1 o'clock, sensitive to everyone's time. Just some closing remarks. The AIA California will be hosting a roundtable in May focused on building performance strategy tools, so which LPA has been talking extensively about. More information will be shared with everyone in a follow-up email. And a big thank you to Keith and Eric for this excellent presentation, and another big congratulations to LPA for receiving the 2021 AIA California Firm Award. So thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for the great questions.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate the time.
And just, if you've made it this far, the AIA California staff will be submitting your AIA CE credits, and you'll see that in your transcripts in about 2 weeks. And as always, more resources and tools can be found on the AIA California's website, which you can find in the chat, aiacalifornia.org/climate action. And more details on the 2021 Climate Action webinar series will be shared with you via email. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and have a great Wednesday or Thursday. Hi. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Happy Earth Day. Bye.